All right, let's be real for a second. You've probably heard the name JonBenet Ramsey. It's one of those cases that's just always been there, right? A ghost story everyone kind of knows. And you probably think you have a pretty good idea of what happened. I thought I did too. But what if everything you thought you knew was just the tip of the iceberg? Imagine it's the morning after Christmas. You walk downstairs in your own home, the safest place you know, and you find a note. A 2.5-page ransom note left on your staircase, saying your 6-year-old daughter has been kidnapped by a foreign faction. But here's the twist that makes this case an absolute nightmare. There was no kidnapping. For 8 hours, while friends comforted the family and police swarmed the house, JonBenet was right there the whole time, dead, in their own basement. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's an open and shut case. It seems obvious. The evidence has to point in one clear direction, and the police must have known who did it from day one. And that's where this story gets truly insane. What if I told you the most concrete piece of evidence, the killer's DNA, found on JonBenet's body, doesn't match anyone in the family? What if the so-called break-in point had a perfect, undisturbed spider web blocking the way? This case isn't a straight line. It's a maze. And every path leads to a dead end. Today, we're going to walk through that maze together. We're going to look at the evidence that was ignored, the clues that make no sense, and the facts that turn the entire investigation on its head. So, stick around, because the story you think you know is nothing compared to the truth. So, to really understand what went so terribly wrong, you first have to see just how perfectly right everything seemed. Our story takes place in Boulder, Colorado. Even today, it's one of those picturesque American towns. It's safe, it's affluent, and back in the mid-90s, it was the absolute ideal place to raise a family. And right in the heart of this perfect town lived the Ramsey family. From the outside, they weren't just living the American dream. They were the poster family for it. At the head of the family was John Ramsey. He was a serious, respected, self-made man, a Navy veteran who had built a billion-dollar-a-year company called Access Graphics from the ground up. He was wealthy, powerful, and the provider of this picture-perfect life. His wife, Patsy, was the charismatic heart of the family. A former beauty queen herself crowned Miss West Virginia in 1977. She was a vibrant, outgoing socialite who poured all of her energy into her family and her community. She had survived a battle with ovarian cancer and was known for her southern charm and unwavering devotion to her 2 children. They had a 9-year-old son, Burke, and then there was the star of the show, 6-year-old JonBenet. By all accounts, she was a firecracker, a charismatic, energetic little girl who loved to be in the spotlight. Following in her mother's footsteps, she was deeply involved in the world of child beauty pageants. To some, this was a life of glamour and fun for a little girl who loved to perform. To others, it was a controversial and strangely adult world for a 6-year-old. But regardless of what you thought of the pageants, one thing was clear. This was a family that seemed to have everything. A 15-room mansion, millions in the bank, and 2 beautiful kids. They were prominent, they were successful. And on Christmas night, 1996, they had just left a festive party at a friend's house. They came home, put their children to bed, and went to sleep, believing everything was as perfect as it had always been. They had no idea that by the time the sun rose, their perfect world would not just be shattered. It would be the center of a dark and twisted mystery that would captivate the entire world. The Ramseys' perfect world officially ended at 5:52 in the morning on December 26, 1996. Patsy Ramsey tells the operator that she found her 6-year-old daughter missing from her bed. In her place, on a spiral staircase at the back of the house, was a ransom note. And this wasn't just a few sentences scribbled on a piece of paper. It was 2.5 pages long, demanding a very specific $118,000. While Patsy is on the phone with 911, something happens that will be debated for decades. After giving her address, she seems to think she's hung up the phone, but the line is still connected. The operator remains on the line, and in the background, muffled, chaotic voices can be heard. Investigators would later spend years trying to decipher those final, haunting seconds. The first officer, Rick French, arrives within minutes. He finds the 3-page note and sees a family in distress. But right here, in the first few minutes of the investigation, is where the first critical mistake is made. The house is a potential kidnapping scene, which means it is a crime scene. But it isn't treated like one. It's not sealed off. The Ramseys, distraught, call their friends over for support. Soon, the house is full of people. The Ramseys' friends, the Whites and the Fernies, arrive. So does a victim advocate. They are trying to help, of course, but in the process, they walk all over the house. They hug the Ramseys, and one friend even helps clean the kitchen, wiping down the counters with a spray cleaner. Think about that. An active crime scene with potential fingerprints, fibers, and footprints is being cleaned. Meanwhile, for the next 7.5 hours, everyone operates under one assumption. This is a kidnapping. They set up a wiretap on the phone, and they wait for the kidnapper to call with instructions about the $118,000. They wait, and they wait, but the call never comes. Finally, a detective on the scene, Linda Arndt, feels that something isn't right. The initial police search of the house hours earlier had been surprisingly brief. She pulls John Ramsey aside and suggests he and his friend, Fleet White, do a more thorough, top-to-bottom search of the house to see if anything seems out of place. John Ramsey starts in the basement. He heads straight for a small, obscure room he called the wine cellar. He opens the door, and there she was. Lying on the floor was the body of his 6-year-old daughter. She was wrapped in her favorite white blanket. Her mouth was covered with duct tape. Her wrists were bound above her head. A nylon cord was tied tightly around her neck. In a moment of pure panic and grief, John rips the duct tape from her mouth and carries her body upstairs, into the living room, laying her on the floor amidst the crowd of friends and police. In that instant, the crime scene was contaminated in the most irreversible way possible. Any trace evidence on her body, on the blanket, or in the wine cellar was now hopelessly compromised. At 1:05 p.m., the kidnapping case officially became a homicide investigation. The killer hadn't been a phantom who called from a payphone miles away. The killer had been in the house. And the most baffling, contradictory, and infuriating murder investigation in modern American history had just begun. Once the house officially became a homicide scene, investigators started digging into the evidence. And what they found wasn't a clear trail leading to a killer. It was a collection of bizarre, contradictory clues that even today make almost no logical sense. This is the puzzle box of the Ramsey case. Let's start with the piece of evidence that started it all, the ransom note. Right away, it was unlike any ransom note the FBI had ever seen. First, the length. It was 2.5 pages long. Most ransom notes are short, direct, and to the point. This was practically a monologue. Second, the materials. It was written on paper from a notepad found inside the house. The pen used to write it, also from inside the house. The author even did a practice run on a different page of the same notepad, which was later found in the trash. It's incredibly risky for an intruder to spend that much time in a victim's home before the crime. Then there's the amount, $118,000. Why that number? It was almost the exact amount of a bonus John had received from his company earlier that year. How would a random stranger know that? And the language itself is just weird. It's full of quotes and misquotes from movies like Speed, Dirty Harry, and Ransom. Lines like, listen carefully. And now you are in possession of ... It's signed Victory, SBTC, which to this day, no one has been able to definitively decode. The handwriting was analyzed for weeks. The conclusion? They couldn't rule Patsy Ramsey out, but they couldn't confirm it was her either. So you have a note that feels both deeply personal, using the family's own supplies and financial details, but also strangely impersonal, written like a bad movie script. When the coroner examined JonBenet's body, the evidence became even more disturbing and complex. The official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. In plain English, she was killed in 2 distinct ways. First, she suffered a massive 8.5-inch fracture on the right side of her skull, a blow so severe it would have caused immediate unconsciousness or death. And second, she was strangled. The garrote used to strangle her was homemade, fashioned from a length of nylon cord and the broken handle of a paintbrush. When police searched the house, they found the other half of that broken paintbrush in Patsy Ramsey's art supply kit. The autopsy also noted 2 small, abrasion-like marks on her body, which led one investigator to believe she had been subdued with a stun gun, a key piece of the intruder theory. However, other experts have strongly disputed this, claiming the marks could have come from anything, even a toy. And then there was the pineapple. The coroner found partially digested pineapple in JonBenet's stomach. This was a huge discovery, because her parents, John and Patsy, initially told police they didn't remember her eating anything after they got home from their Christmas party. But police found a bowl of pineapple in the kitchen with a spoon in it. It had Patsy's fingerprints on it, and the fingerprints of their 9-year-old son, Burke. It's a tiny detail that creates a huge contradiction and suggests a late-night event that her parents either forgot or lied about. Now for the piece of evidence that completely flips the script and fuels the intruder theory more than anything else. The DNA in 1997. A sophisticated analysis of the clothes JonBenet was wearing when she died revealed a bombshell. On the waistband of her long johns, and in a drop of blood found in her underwear, forensic scientists isolated a partial DNA profile. It belonged to an unknown male. Let's call him Unknown Male 1. This was the smoking gun everyone was looking for. Police immediately tested the DNA against John, Burke, and every male in the Ramsey family and their circle of friends. The results? No match. For over 25 years, that DNA profile has been run through the FBI's massive national database, CODIS, which contains the DNA of millions of convicted felons. To this day, there has never been a match. This is hard, scientific evidence that a person, unknown to the family and unknown to law enforcement, came into contact with JonBenet Ramsey that night. So if there was an intruder, how did he get in? That's where the evidence gets confusing again. Investigators scoured the massive 15-room house and found no signs of forced entry. No kicked-in doors, no broken locks. The only potential entry point they found was a small, ground-level basement window that had been broken and left unlatched. John Ramsey said he had broken it weeks earlier when he was locked out. This seemed like a plausible entry point for an intruder. But when police first examined the window, there was a pristine, undisturbed spider web in the corner of the window grate. An investigator later testified that it was highly unlikely someone could have climbed through that window without disturbing the web. Furthermore, there were no footprints in the snow outside the window, and a suitcase was placed directly beneath it inside, which seemed to be used as a step. An intruder would have had to place it there himself. Finally, near JonBenet's body, investigators found a single clear boot print in the dust of the wine cellar floor. It was from a high-tech boot, but it didn't match any shoes owned by the family. It remains unidentified. A note written in the house. A murder weapon from the house. Foreign DNA on the body. And a crime scene with no clear entry. Every single piece of hard evidence directly contradicts another. And that is why, to solve this case, you have to choose which evidence you believe and which evidence you ignore. With such a baffling collection of clues, 2 primary theories emerged early on, and they are completely at odds. The first, and the one the Ramsey family themselves has always championed, is the intruder theory. This theory posits that an unknown person broke into their home, committed the crime, and then vanished into the night. One of the most vocal and respected proponents of this theory was veteran homicide detective Lou Smith. He was a Colorado Springs detective brought in to assist the Boulder police, and he quickly became convinced that the evidence pointed squarely away from the Ramseys and towards an outside perpetrator. He even famously resigned from the investigation because he felt the police were ignoring crucial evidence that didn't fit their preferred narrative. Smith identified what he believed was the undeniable point of entry for this intruder, that broken basement window. He argued that the suitcase found directly beneath it, inside the house, wasn't just left there. It was used as a step. And while the police pointed to the undisturbed spider web outside as proof against entry, Smith believed it was possible to slip past. Beyond the window, Smith emphasized the forensic evidence that pointed away from the family. That single, mysterious high-tech boot print in the dust near JonBenet's body. No one in the Ramsey household, or among their known friends, owned boots of that brand or size. This, to Smith, was a clear sign of an outsider. But the absolute cornerstone of the intruder theory, the piece of evidence that advocates believe cannot be explained away, is the unknown male 1-foot DNA profile. This wasn't just a stray hair. It was trace genetic material found in 3 separate, critical locations on JonBenet's underwear and long johns, and even under her fingernails. When this DNA was found to belong to an unidentified male, not John, not Burke, not any family member or friend, it was seen as irrefutable proof. Furthermore, Smith's investigation suggested that the nylon parachute cord used for the garrote and the duct tape found on JonBenet's mouth could not be conclusively sourced to the Ramsey home. While the paintbrush handle came from Patsy's kit, the cord itself and the roll of duct tape were never found within the house. This led to the conclusion that the intruder brought at least some of their own tools for the crime. And for the more chilling details, Smith was also the main proponent of the stun gun theory. He believed the mysterious marks on JonBenet's back and neck were consistent with the probes of a stun gun, suggesting the perpetrator used it to subdue her quickly and silently while she was still in her bed. This would explain how she was taken, without waking her parents or Burke. So, the intruder theory paints a picture of a cunning, violent individual who carefully planned their entry, subdued JonBenet, then, in a bizarre and inexplicable move, wrote a lengthy, theatrical ransom note using the family's own supplies, and finally committed a brutal murder before slipping away, leaving behind only their DNA and a few other tantalizing clues. For many, this theory is the only one that makes sense of the irrefutable scientific evidence. But as you're about to see, not everyone agreed. But from the moment they stepped inside the house, the Boulder Police Department and many seasoned investigators saw a very different story. To them, the crime scene didn't feel like the work of a professional kidnapper. It felt chaotic, personal, and above all, staged. This is the family cover-up theory. Proponents of this theory ask you to look at that ransom note again. Would a foreign intruder, whose first language might not even be English, spend 20 to 30 minutes inside the house writing a rambling 3-page letter on the family's own notepad? Would they use bizarre movie quotes? Or would they just grab the child and go? The note felt like a performance, an attempt by someone inside the house to create a fictional narrative. Then there's the murder weapon itself, the garrote made from the handle of one of Patsy's own paintbrushes. It's an intensely personal and improvised weapon. Police found it hard to believe that an intruder would ignore bringing their own weapon, and instead wander around the basement looking for supplies to build one from scratch. The lack of a clear break-in was the biggest red flag for police. The undisturbed cobweb, the lack of footprints in the snow outside. It all suggested the break-in was an illusion, a scene set to distract from the fact that the killer was already inside. This is what led investigators to a horrifying alternative scenario, one that has become the most prominent counter-theory. It doesn't begin with a monster breaking in, but with a simple late-night snack, that bowl of pineapple. This theory focuses on JonBenet's 9-year-old brother, Burke. In this scenario, JonBenet, after everyone is home from the party, takes a piece of pineapple from a bowl Burke was eating. A childish argument breaks out. In a flash of anger, Burke, who allegedly had a history of behavioral issues, grabs the nearest heavy object, perhaps the large flashlight left on the kitchen counter, and strikes his sister. The blow to the head wasn't meant to kill her, but it does. It's a tragic, horrifying accident. When John and Patsy discover what has happened, they are faced with an unthinkable choice: report the accident and risk losing their only remaining child to the justice system, or cover it up. In a state of absolute panic and grief, they make a decision. They carry JonBenet's body to the basement. To make the death look like a sexually motivated kidnapping and murder, they stage the rest of the scene, the bindings, the duct tape, and Patsy, channeling her dramatic flair, spends the next half hour crafting the bizarre ransom note to create a fictional kidnapper. The theory argues that this explains everything: the pineapple, the in-house materials, the oddly specific ransom amount, the lack of a real kidnapping, and the intimate, improvised nature of the crime scene. With the evidence pointing in two completely opposite directions, the legal system was just as confused. For years, the case was stuck in a stalemate. The district attorney, Alex Hunter, felt he didn't have enough evidence to prosecute anyone. But a Boulder County grand jury disagreed. In October of 1999, after a secret 13-month investigation, the grand jury voted to indict both John and Patsy Ramsey on felony charges of child abuse resulting in death. It was a bombshell. But in a move that shocked the public, Alex Hunter refused to sign the indictment and file the charges. He argued that he and his prosecutors still didn't believe they could prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. So the indictment was sealed, and the Ramseys were never charged. The case went cold for nearly a decade. Then, in 2008, came another shocking twist. A new district attorney, Mary Lacey, had been re-examining the case using more advanced touch DNA testing methods. This new analysis confirmed the unknown male 1D JonBenet's clothing was not a composite, but from a single, unidentified individual. Based on this, Lacey did something unprecedented. She wrote a public letter of apology to John Ramsey, formally exonerating him, his late wife Patsy, and their son Burke, stating, "We consider it appropriate to now state that it is our conclusion that the evidence has vindicated your family." Patsy, sadly, had passed away from cancer 2 years earlier, in 2006, never seeing the official exoneration. But even that wasn't the final word. Subsequent district attorneys have walked back Mary Lacey's complete exoneration, and many original investigators still stand by the family involvement theory. Today, John Ramsey continues to advocate for advanced DNA tester to find the killer. Burke Ramsey, after successfully suing CBS for defamation over a documentary that accused him of the crime, lives a private life. And the Boulder Police Department officially lists the case as a cold, but still active, homicide investigation. For almost 3 decades, the debate has been trapped in a stalemate. The intruder theory, which relies on the DNA, or the family cover-up theory, which relies on the bizarre evidence at the scene. It feels like you have to pick one, and in doing so, you have to ignore a mountain of evidence that contradicts it. But what if there's a third option? What if the reason the pieces have never fit is because we've been trying to solve the wrong puzzle? There is another theory, one that doesn't force you to ignore the evidence, but instead uses all of it. It suggests that the killer was an intruder, but the elaborate staging wasn't a panicked cover-up by the parents. The staging was the entire point. This theory suggests the motive was never money. The motive was a deep, personal, and venomous hatred for John Ramsey. The goal wasn't just to kill his daughter, but to psychologically destroy him by framing his wife for the murder. The entire crime was a performance, a twisted play written and directed by a killer who wanted a front-row seat to watch the Ramsey family implode. Look at the evidence through that lens. Suddenly, the contradictions dissolve. The ransom note isn't a bizarre, failed attempt at a kidnapping. It's a brilliant piece of psychological warfare. Of course, it was written on Patsy's notepad, with a pen from their house. Of course, it was long, emotional, and practiced. The killer took their time, because the goal was to mimic Patsy, to plant clues that would make her the #1 suspect. The specific $118,000 ransom wasn't for money. It was to show John, "I know you. I know your life." The garrote, made from Patsy's own paintbrush, wasn't a clumsy improvised weapon. It was a deliberately chosen prop. The killer could have brought any weapon they wanted, but using something so intimately connected to Patsy was another way to scream, "The killer is inside the house." And most importantly, the DNA. In this theory, the unknown male DNA isn't a confusing loose end. It is the killer's calling card. It is the one piece of hard, scientific proof that an outsider, someone with a personal grudge, was in that basement. This theory explains how a crime can have all the hallmarks of a staged, inside job, while also having definitive forensic evidence of an intruder. It's because the intruder wanted it to look like an inside job. It wasn't a botched kidnapping. It was a perfectly executed frame-up. When you stop looking at this crime as being about JonBenet and start seeing it as an act of revenge against John. It's the only theory where every single piece of evidence works together in horrifying harmony. So, who could have held that kind of personal grudge? Who had the intimate knowledge of the family and the house to pull this off? Well, there are suspects we've likely never heard of. A family friend, a coworker of John's, a relative. We may never know the true identity of the killer, but we might now know just what happened on that cold Christmas night in Boulder, Colorado. Click here to continue down the many rabbit holes we delve into with us. And before you go, if this case fascinates you, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. You won't want to miss what comes next.